Yeah, why don't we get into it? Why don't we hop in? And we'll see how it goes. So Jacob's Wife, like we said, is from 2021, and it is about Anne, married to a small town minister, feels her life has been shrinking over the past 30 years. Encountering the master brings her a new sense of power and an appetite to live bolder. However, the change comes with a heavy body count. It wasn't actually that heavy, and I'll talk about it. The body count is problematic. And like when you read that, it's really interesting. You're like, ooh, like that's exactly the whole thesis of what this series is for the Ghouls. It's perfect. And then we watched it, and I was like, there was several parts where we're like, do we have to keep watching this, or could we just turn it off? And we kept watching. So we watch it for you. You don't have to. But Jacob's Wife follows Anne Feder, who's played by the talented scream queen Barbara Crampton, and her pastor husband Jacob Feder. And our first glimpse into Anne's life is one of solitude. She sits in the pews as her husband delivers his sermons. Then she stands by his side as he greets their congregation. She is verbally petted as a good wife, like, or just like a good godly woman constantly, just for being there and being silent. And she remains silent, though throughout this whole like introduction to her, you can really sense that she has this like instinct to intervene in a lot of the conversations, to just like literally have an opinion, and to be anything more than a wallflower that she's been for the entirety of this film. And later, when it's revealed that a young woman from their congregation has gone missing, her husband and friends assume that the girl has simply run away. And that seems like an impossibility in Anne's mind. And throughout the scene, that urge to speak that she's kind of been like pushing down this entire first part of this film continues to bubble up. And as a viewer, that tension really tugs at you each time she is spoken for or talked over. Like, it's like, Anne thinks this, and then she goes to like say something, and they're like, Anne does that, right? It's never like, let's stop and listen to Anne, which like I really felt that like because you could see her, like I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be good. And eventually she opens her mouth to defend this young woman, and in her hesitancy, like each time had like kind of lost the opportunity, so it comes out as like kind of aggressive, like, oh, just let me say this thing, and it really shocks everyone who's there with her. And eventually, like, they still dismiss what she says. But it's kind of jarring to them because they're just like, who knew that Anne had opinions? Like, that she had thoughts in her head and that they exist, like, she could speak for herself. No one knew.
There we go. I was... I'm trying to do the thingamabob and I fucked it up, but it's fine. I was about to say that it's kind of like when I resonated with that specifically, like as a woman, but also like from a like autism perspective, because I was like, you always like miss the point. Like you wait for your turn to talk. You're like sitting there. You're like, I'm ready. Okay, I'm going to say the thing. I'm going to say it, and then you say it, but it's like 5 minutes too late, and then the conversation just dies, and you're just sitting there like,
this is why I don't intervene.
This is why I don't say words. Oh God, make it end. But yeah, it felt very much like that. But then at the same time, it's like, I don't think that was her experience.
No, but it is like like I even have that where you're just like, oh, okay. I'm thinking about what I'm going to say. I'm going to contribute. And then it's like, oh, that moment has passed. Is it still okay for me to contribute? Can I bring that back up? Like, now I have nothing to contribute. I've also stopped listening to everything that's being said because I'm like stuck trying to remember what it is I want to say.
Yeah, and you're just like, the conversation has gone too fast. How human broken? And
but it seems like with this scene, it's just that she doesn't speak ever. And so they've gotten used to that.
Yeah, like commonly spoken for, as you said, like talked over, spoken for. So when she actually does like say things for herself, they're like, wait, you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
That's like, not your whole vibe. What are you doing? You're supposed to shh.
Yeah. I think your husband already told us what you think.
So. Yeah, so you don't need to say it again. It seems repetitive.
Yes. But yeah, Anne, so later we find that Anne has been working with a group to save and renovate an old historic mill, and her husband dismisses this as like a hobby, like not a job. And he's is surprised that like she exists outside of him. almost. Like
Yeah.
it really felt like he was just like, oh, that thing maybe you mentioned to me does like has some point in your life. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And he shows really like no interest until he learns that the one of the people that's involved in this project is an old flame of hers, and then he's like, now he's like, I don't know if you should go. And this is because
Yeah.
he's
You're my
not.
toy. No one can play with my toy.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think for me, like, it was a moment where I was like, oh, he isn't unaware of like how loveless, sexless, and just like everythingless that this marriage is.
Yeah.
And is very aware that there is temptation for
Yeah.
Anne. But he, even for that moment of like jealousy and hesitancy, it's brushed off pretty quickly because he knows his Anne, right? He's been with her for decades, and she would never. She is a good, God-fearing wife. She does what she is told and what is expected of her. He is not afraid. There's like a
Ugh.
hint of like maybe, but it's like nah, she's gonna behave.
Yeah.
So she meets this old flame, and he plays with her. He's essentially like, telling her about old times when she used to be fun and wild and like just young. She was going to run away to a foreign country and live there. And he's just like, what happened to like the fun Anne, the one who's young and with endless opportunities in front of her? Like, she probably didn't grow up, settle down, and live her life responsibly. Like in a minute.
Yeah.
And like essentially makes her feel bad for just like living a safe life.
Yeah.
And we learn here that Jacob had been there for Anne during trouble with her mother's health, and that he was a very stable, reliable, and kind man that she felt she can settle down with. And so, and then, just as like life is, it passes you by, and before you
Yeah.
know it, you've just been living the same day to day. And so it becomes clear that like this vampire change is going to be like a midlife crisis kind of adventure
Yeah.
for her, or that's what you're hoping. But uh, she, through all those years of being married to Jacob, kind of just lost what her worth is. And
Yeah.
as viewers, we want Anne to leave. Like, we want her to leave Jacob. We want her to find her spark again. And eventually, you see Anne and the old flame sneak off to the old mill to do some location scouting and chemistry scouting between each other. And like, even though you really want her to like do like have better, it's not like you want her to cheat or anything. Like, you want her to be like, oh, this ain't it, and leave Jacob. Like, that's what I was just like, not like, okay, everyone should cheat on their spouse if they're in a loveless marriage. That's not how that works. It's you should leave. Like, you're allowed. Like, I get there's
Yeah.
also like the religious aspect to that she has to deal with. It's like you can't have like a pastor's wife leave him. That's a big deal. But
Yeah.
you should be able to feel like you can leave a relationship that is more harmful than it is good, and it really is for her because she doesn't have any autonomy. But what these two don't know about this mill is that it is the current home to the Master, an ancient vampiric being that has set up shop in their small decaying town, and he's very like Nosferatu looking. He's very
Yeah.
silly. There are parts of like when it comes to the vampire and like the gore, that's very fun in this film. And we're in like if it was wrapped around literally any other film, I would have been like, this is great. And that's the part that I enjoyed. I was like, it was so silly, and I was like laughing. Because it's supposed to be comedic,
Yeah.
but then it's just but during this time, Anne is turned, and it starts her journey into the monstrous femme. However, this journey, though at times empowering for Anne, fumbles with that independence, autonomy, and self-respect that we wanted her to find in the end, and ultimately drops it. And my hope in watching was that she would become Anne in the end, shrugging off the identity of Jacob's wife for good.
Yeah.
And she didn't ever. She remains Jacob's wife forever. like they don't trust each other, and I don't know what I was supposed to learn at the end. We'll get there. But I was really expecting so much more from a film titled Jacob's Wife, honestly. In the beginning, I could see where the film was considering to take us, and I was really excited because we have this church wife, Anne, who turns vampire and wakens a strong, independent woman within and takes back her life. That's what I wanted. That's what I was hoping for. And there are moments where we're teased with this possibility. after being turned, she feels violated, changed, and aware of this different person she's becoming. And she like wipes away the blood and she suffers alone, not wanting to bother or maybe even just not feeling comfortable or safe enough to share that with Jacob, which is like, right, a big red flag that you don't want to tell your husband how you've been violated in this way. And she's right to be wary because he doesn't trust her. He never does in this whole experience. So in the morning, she like looks in the mirror and you can see that she's like finally seeing herself, like considering who she is in the mirror and who's looking at her. Like she's examining her body and her being. And she starts to appreciate this woman and the power that she has within her. And there's these moments of joy and like self-discovery and pleasure that are really bright parts of the film. Like seeing Anne drinking blood from a wine glass, listening to music and rearranging the furniture in a house is fun. And her private moment with the master is exciting and you root for her and you yearn for her to actually experience pleasure for once. But so much of that is undermined by the entire story and plot that you kind of forget that those moments even existed.
Yeah. Also, just like a thought that I just realized that like in that the master is also a woman, that there's like queer undertones that we never get to explore either, which is disappointing.
The problem with that is it's not a woman. Like in the story, the master is like, that's how it's been represented in all like the things that are written about it. But it is the master is played by a woman. It's played by the actress who plays the nun in the Conjuring films or whatever, and she does a lot of different monsters. And so because I was, when I looked it up, that because I was like this I was like, who is playing this like master? And I saw that, I was like, ooh, because there could be so, because I was upset, and I'll get into that too, but just like at the idea of like this film where she's supposed to be like taking off of the like oppressive restraints that her husband has put onto her, and then she's gonna go and be subservient to a master. That really, but I was like, no. It was like, I think we're missing the entire part here, which is like another thing we had a problem with Bit for. I was just like, no, not happening. But it's like the master is kind of different, and I did enjoy like what eventually happens with the master, but I did hate how the other vampire refers to the master relationship, and that also made me mad, but that's just because they disrespected all the other characters in this film. So that's a fun side note. Thank you, Kat. Jacob learns of his wife's transformation after finding her devouring their neighbor's corpse, which was actually delightfully gory. She like rips his head off. It was like very funny, and I was like giggling. I was like, this is very funny. And there are like these comedic moments of relief when like you can allow yourself to enjoy the film for a minute. Like in this scene, she says, "It wasn't me." After Jacob like finds her like lapping up his blood, to which he replies, "Of course it was you." Like I am literally watching you do this. And I was like, that's funny. The stupid gore is funny. The awkwardness is funny. But then it's like, but what are we doing here? I think one of the biggest problems with Anne's awakening is Jacob. Because when she becomes more confident in herself, this woman who once found the red lipstick too sexy to wear to dinner is now wearing low-cut dresses, red lipstick, and styling her hair in a new way. Jacob picks up on this and immediately hates it. Like, he's not like, ooh, my wife is hot. He's like, now she's a vixen. Now she's trouble. Now she isn't the plain Anne that I know will do what I tell her to do. Now she's unpredictable, and he can't stand it.
She's a person instead of the idea of a person.
Yeah, she used to be how he made her. And now she's not.
Adam's rib energy.
Yes, and he hates it. And there's this part where the master tempts Anne throughout like this film, reminding her of her innate power, her passion, her right to be pleased and desired. But time and time again, she chooses Jacob. And it's like this man who will never trust or appreciate her fire and strength, like ever. And he's made that clear. He does not like her. He doesn't like who she's become. And he really never even cared about her when she was what he wanted anyway. and he still feels like in the film, like he's the protagonist in a way, and that like her changing has been done to him.
Oh yeah, no, that's super fair.
Like it's he's been robbed of a wife, of the obedient wife that he was supposed to have. Like he put in his time, he helped her when her mom was sick. He's a pastor, he deserves this. And by her trying to find any autonomy is disrespectful. Even to the point where like when they go to decide to kill the master, he forbids Anne to go. Like he keeps robbing her of her autonomy, like the whole time, over and over again, all the way up to the end. Spoilers. Don't watch this film. I'll watch it for you. Where he kills the master for her.
Yep.
And like during that time, the master is explaining to Anne that he only chooses, like the master only chooses specific people to turn, and that they aren't subservient to him. He's like, I don't own you, which is contradictory to what that other vampire said. But essentially it's just like, I did it because I saw that you were struggling. I saw that you have potential to be more and to be strong, and that they were keeping this from you. They're never going to respect you. They're never going to love you. They're never going to appreciate who you are right now. Like they don't trust you. Look at them. And while Anne is like trying to figure out what she wants to do, make a decision for herself. Like the master is telling her like, Jacob won't accept you, which is true, and that she's better than him, which is also true. But before she can make that decision to accept the power or to kill the master herself, Jacob yet again steals her ability to choose and kills the master all by himself, and he thinks he's a hero. He's like, oh good, I saved you from making a decision for yourself. And the disappointment I felt every time she chose Jacob is like, it was like fire. It's like the lackluster, awkward sex that they had, the complacency from Jacob, like in their relationship, like every time it was just like, well, he's safe. And the consistent just settling of Anne on Jacob made the film really hard to watch. And though I enjoy the gore and horror, like I said, I was really outraged by the lack of empowerment and growth for Anne. Like even in the end, it was supposed to be this tease of like, they don't trust each other because like they're like we're gonna be together forever, and they go to kiss, but he's got like a weapon and she's got a weapon, and it's just like, or he's got the stake and she's gonna go bite him, so it's like oh maybe there's still trouble in paradise. It's like
there was never there's never paradise. Like what do you mean? I think
always that
this film tried to do what Santa Clarita Diet did, in that like the husband's cool with it. You know what I mean? Like that's what it was trying to do, but they did not have the relationship set up where like in Santa Clarita Diet, like they had a true real bond that like transitioned into the monstrous state, where like in this, he was the worst the entire time, did not see her as an actual person. And then once she's monsterized, continues to not see her as a person, because
if anything, now she's an enemy. She's evil now.
Yeah. And like, totally, like the constant choosing of him was so gross, even more so than enraging. Like it was both, but like it was like, why? And also it was super gross that like she was like, the master was like, you are the chosen one. It's like, why
for what? She's
for
done
why
nothing.
You've turned other people. why is it this little white lady that you're so about? It's the whole time
she's like maybe Jacob's right. Maybe she ain't got nothing to bring to the table.
Oh no.
But no. But I agree that it was like first of all, he's no Timothy Oliphant, so that's first and foremost. But yeah, because there's a point where he's like being cool with it, but he clearly is like, it's because he wants to stay relevant. It's not because he cares about her. It's because he still wants to be a part of the story. And I feel like those parts when she does choose him in the middle of the film was like the director being like, see, it's different than you thought. Like I'm being unpredictable. Like I'm twisting it. And I was like, no, but you messed up. Like if this was a predictable film, would have enjoyed it. Hands down. I would have had a really good time with the predictability of this film.
Yeah, like just let her murder him. Like why?
Let me have that.
Like I get he took care of her when her mom, but she doesn't owe him.
No.
It like very much ties into the whole like incel argument that like if you take care, if you're nice to a woman, you take her, you pay for food, you do that, you're entitled to her and her body and everything that comes with that. And it just played into that instead of doing what it should have done, which was play against that. But I guess that's, oh well, ultimately it's kind of the reality of what it is currently.
Yes. But there is actually an entire other argument besides just the fact that she doesn't actually get to be a monstrous femme in the way that we were talking about, that really solidifies this film as being bad. Yeah. So allow me to go on this journey with you. So other than the failure to live up to the promise of its name, the plot that seemed so obvious, it never revealed itself, there was actually an entirely different issue that I had with this film. And if we are to consider Jacob's Wife a tale of feminism, then it is very specifically white woman feminism. Yep. Period. Each and every peripheral character is generally a person of color in this film, and they are done wrong. Yeah, flat out. Amelia, who is the young church girl who takes care of her mother, is the first victim in the film, and that was already like a no-go, and an issue that we had where we almost turned off. And that's like in the first 15 minutes. I was like, it is 2021 when this film came out. There's no excuse to make a Black character the first victim. Yep. That is old news. I don't understand why it happens. It's the same problem I had with Quiet Place 2. So many things you could do that are a win, but you do that.
Like for no reason. It's just like lazy.
How many times they killed Black characters in Quiet Place 2, but in this film, it's just like all of them. And I'm going to go into it. Yeah. But besides that, just besides the fact that they chose to make her the first victim, I hated how dismissive Jacob is to Amelia right from the beginning. Yeah. That he clearly has no care for her as a human, but he only sees her as another face amongst the congregation. He's just like, yes, you're doing a good job taking care of your mom. It sucks that she's awful. Isn't it terrible that she's like, left the grace of God and she's gross? Which is not how you deal with those issues. Anyway, and it's again that thing of like, you exist to serve someone else. And so he's like, good job doing that.
Yeah. I mean, Jacob's like a narcissist ultimately. Like,
I mean,
his whole thing is getting control back. Doesn't actually see people as people. Is what
he's a pastor. Okay. Yeah. But what really, really started to make it really upsetting was when Amelia goes missing, because everyone assumes that she ran away. Yeah. And I cannot help but believe that were Amelia white, the town would be scouring the world for her. They would turn it upside down. She would be on the news, and they would not be having that conversation at dinner. It would have been like, oh my God, that poor girl. Yeah. In season 3 of You, actually, there's an episode titled Missing White Woman Syndrome, where it's revealed to Joe that by killing and disappearing a white woman in a suburban neighborhood, he messed up because the world is going to bend over backward to find her. And it's made even more impactful in that show, in that the person who explains it to him is Tati Gabrielle, who is a young Black woman and is like, you're an idiot for not knowing all the complexities of this issue. Yeah. And in You, there's a whole discussion about the misrepresentation and the disproportionately significant attention white women and girls receive in the news when they're missing, versus the incredibly underreported and undermined missing person cases for BIPOC women and girls. There are entire documentaries, podcasts, and organizations that are dedicated to shining light on this issue. And in our Ways to Help section, I will include many of those organizations and initiatives that are focused on finding Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are missing because they are completely just like forgotten. Yeah. In Canada, there's a severe problem with missing Indigenous women that just like not until recent times when people were like, hey, this is an issue, that people stopped and was like, wow, that's a lot. Like, that's a big number. Right. And so like how I was like, this is 2021, how ignorant of the entire world or existence, like people who exist outside of yourself and your one experience, like how could you be so deaf and not seeing of these people? Like I was like, this is so tone deaf. It's absurd. Yeah. And so in this dinner scene, the intent here is for you to feel bad for Anne. And it's like in a way successful. Like I said, you can see her being talked over and dismissed. And when she is met when she does speak up, she's met with confusion by her peers. But here, she's also supposed to be seen as a hero to some degree because she's sticking up for this young girl. Like, she's actually seeing her. She heard her out. She feels a connection because she's also caring for someone. She cared for her own mother, and knows that struggle. So when you're watching, you may see a white feminist who is speaking out against injustice towards another woman and trying to use her privilege as a white woman to get their attention. But this shifts completely when the film decides to put her experiences first and to villainize the very person she was defending.
Yep.
Completely. So Amelia is a vampire. Like I said, she was the first victim. She was turned into a vampire by the master, apparently not good enough to be the chosen one.
Yep.
That said, but good enough to turn. Even though, whatever. And then she's like super subservient to the master. She like calls him the master. I was like, that's a problem.
Yeah.
It's like, you cannot have a young black girl calling anybody master when they look like, what are we doing? But Jacob encounters her in the mill while antagonizing two young teens of color who are just out having fun.
Yeah.
He's been antagonizing them the whole time. Amelia, though her fight is clearly with Jacob, murders one of the teens, Oscar, and then taunts Jacob, like Exorcist style, where she's like, your mother's a whore, whatever. But she's like empowered. Like, she shows him like she's happy with the self-discovery. She's free of like the burden that her mother was and the expectation of society. And she is the feminist story that I was looking for in Jacob's life. But instead, she becomes fodder for the fetters. Okay.
Yeah.
She like... Later, when they're seeking out the master, they run into Amelia, and that's like Jacob ends up murdering her, and that was a big problem because this whole situation, the whole point of why they were going to kill the master was to quote unquote free Anne because she's in trouble, right? So with that logic, if they were to kill the master, then they could have freed Amelia too.
Yeah.
But they don't care. They just killed her. At all. They didn't care that she was just literally just extra. She was just there. She was in their way to complete whatever task they were doing. And Amelia, who is a young, vulnerable woman and very much part of their community, is just dismissed. Amelia, who Anne had defended just days before, is now too far gone and not good enough to save. Because Amelia isn't playing her role the way she was supposed to anymore. She wasn't fitting into the society and the obligations that they were putting on her at the very beginning that made her worthy of finding a good husband and having a good life. And so much more could be said about the treatment of Black women specifically, the expectation on certain behaviors, the policing of their pain and emotions, and that when a white woman is angry, she is heard, but when a Black woman is angry, she is being unprofessional, she is aggressive, she needs to tone down the attitude.
Yeah.
And when I was watching this, I was just like, how can you miss all of these undertones? Like, how can you miss all of these implications as a director, as a creator, and just be so ignorant to other people's experiences that you make a film like this? And Amelia is a Black woman who's cut down for being too aware of herself, for finally feeling comfortable in her own skin. Eli is a young Black girl who goes to the police after her friend Oscar, a Latina person, is murdered, and she is dismissed because she has a record. And even though the evidence clearly points to Jacob doing shady things, his Bible is found in there, and they still dismiss it.
They don't give her
any credit. Like, I was like, are you kidding me? The neighbor that Anne eats in a frenzy after he came to check on her well-being is named Naveed and has a young child, and clearly they're in a mixed race relationship. And then there's a young Black girl who witnesses two white people stealing a body and putting it into their trunk, and she is calm, cool, collected, and made into an uncomfortable joke. She says she won't tell on them if they tell her a curse word, to which Anne tells her to F off.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly uncomfortable for a pastor's wife of a clearly majority POC town to curse out a young girl while they are stealing a body in front of her.
Yep.
And even the butcher in the supermarket does not report Anne for literally only ordering blood, which is an incredibly reasonable time to call authorities to give them a heads up about this weirdo. Instead, he keeps it to himself because there's no way that the police are going to listen to this Black man over a story of a white woman who, mind you, later is found draining someone in her home.
Yep.
Again, they know. They're like, this is not gonna, they're not Eli who's like, maybe there's hope. There isn't. So the film fails to give us the feminist arc that we were looking for. And while half-heartedly even trying to do that, also manages to completely abuse and misuse BIPOC bodies. If you're going to make a film about a white woman finding her power at the expense of and on top of Black and brown bodies, then at least give her autonomy in the end. No one wins in Jacob's life. And I think it's really safe to say this is a no for Ghouls.
Yep.
It's like, this is absolutely a failure on the part of creators. And I cannot like condone this in the Ghouls history of films. Top of the we dislike.
Yeah, it's with contracted.
Yeah.
Not redeemable. There's nothing good about it. It's honestly the amount of times we almost turned it off. And it's like, it's interesting too, because I don't think this is going to be something like Midsummer where we go back and we're like, oh, it's different. No.
You can't like you can't convince me. You can't.
Yeah. Because also if it was like, maybe that's what they were trying to do, then it was not this man's job to tell that message then.
Yeah. Like maybe Barbara should have written it, right? If she was like pioneering it. If anything, it just shows how clearly out of touch she is too about being this white feminist. Like, did you feel like a win? Did it feel like a win to you, Barbara? Like at the end, did you feel like that Anne got to be Anne and not Jacob's wife? Because she didn't. She was always Jacob's wife. And then they just got to like, they got to get away with everything. There was never a time where I felt like I was rooting for them. And then all of these people have to suffer around them. And every single time they were a person of color. And it was like, that's just why. Like, did you think you were doing a good thing by including people of color in your film? You were like, oh, look at us. There's so many of them. But you killed them. And the one you left was the sheriff, which is already a problem. Like, we already have so many things to unpack there.
And they end the film on this scene specifically where the police force is just like, Jacob, handle your wife.
Yes.
She literally was tied someone up and draining them in her living room. And the response is not, this is a crime.
Yeah.
Arrest her for murdering all these people. It was, hey, Jacob, your wife's doing a lot. Can you handle that? This is more of a religious thing than a serial killer spree.
Yeah.
Like this is something definitely up your alley. And it's like,
just because you confirm the existence of vampires doesn't mean that vampires can't be held accountable for their actions. And like, that's exactly what they were like. We killed the master. And so that wasn't a real crime. They weren't a real person. And neither was your wife.
It was only BIPOC people. So like, what? So like, even if that's what they were trying to convey, like in the world of giving this film way too much credit that it does not deserve, even if that's what they were trying to do, who is Travis Stevens?
Yeah.
And does he even kind of have the right to tell that story? My guess is no.
I'm going to guess no as well.
So, yeah.
What are you doing? First of all, you got two first names. And you know how we feel about that. That's not the problem, but just putting it out there, you know how we feel about that. It's not even your fault. But right from because when I was typing up this script, when I first wrote it out, that's the first thing I thought when I read it the director.
You're
but
like,
there's so many things. It's just like contracted when I said, don't put maggots in a vagina unless it's going to mean something. Yeah. Don't put people of color, Black, Indigenous, all of them in your film if you're going to abuse them in this way and not like, and be just so ignorant. Like I was telling Kat before this, I was like, if Anna Lily Amirpour can like get abuse from audiences and have like that complicated interaction because she featured a person of color who died in the film, and someone like called her out for it, if she can be held accountable and people can go after her, then I think this man can be held accountable and should be. And there is none of that. Like the fact that no one in any of the articles that we read even remotely mentioned the problems.
I searched for it. I even changed my search classification. I was like, Jacob's wife, problem. Jacob's wife, white feminism. Jacob's wife, abusive POC character. Found nothing, literally nothing. And it was really why I was like, I looked for it. Like I even used different keywords. I wasn't even just looking up the film. Like I was looking for a specific somebody saying something and I did not find anything. And if you are out there and you also feel this way, please tell us, because
Yes.
you're not on Google and we don't know. Well, we know why, but like,
Yeah, yeah. And I let us know like how you feel and if you felt similarly and you feel like it's not being represented or covered properly. And because it isn't, it really isn't. And I think people need to do that. One of the other things Kat and I were talking about was like you can't praise horror or film for having an impact on the world in positive ways when you don't also like critique it when it's not doing that, when it's being harmful. Like, because you completely like invalidate like how important the impact of film media are when you just dismiss it when it's bad, like when you don't want to harp on it, you don't want to critique it, but you only want to ever talk about when it does a good job.
Yeah.
Because that does a disservice to the entire genre and to media as a whole, and as for you as a critic to not be scrutinizing at times. Like it's okay for you not to love everything, and it's okay for you to pick out on things that are not good and to call them out for that and say we need more films about female vampires kicking butt, or just like femme vampires kicking butt, like whatever it is. We need more of that. We don't have it, and the one that we do is trash. And also Bit let us down too. Like,
at the end there.
Pulled its punches. So yeah, if you're out there and you have a vampire script, we want to see it. We want it out there.
Yeah. There we go.